She had studied 17 species across 4 star systems. In 22 years of xenological field research, Senior Analyst Veya-Sor of the Galactic Consortium had never filed an emergency report. She was about to file one now. The subject species was human, Homo sapiens, Earth-origin bipedal primate, assessed as a Class 3 emerging civilization, pre-interstellar, moderately technological, low to moderate threat, a routine assignment, the kind given to experienced researchers precisely because nothing interesting was expected to happen. Veya-Sor had spent 3 years decoding the bioluminescent seizures the colony used as language, their entire bodies flickering with meaning that most researchers never bothered to understand. After that, humans seemed simple. She would spend 14 days learning how wrong she was. She established her concealed position near a military training facility on the 3rd day of the local solar cycle. High walls, open yards, obstacle structures, dense, varied human activity across multiple behavioral categories, simultaneously exactly what an early-stage observer needed. She calibrated her instruments, opened her recording log, settled in for what she expected would be 2 weeks of careful, unremarkable baseline cataloging. By the 3rd hour, she had already started to suspect something was wrong. 14 human subjects were navigating an obstacle course, elevated platforms, rope structures, water obstacles, a standard physical conditioning circuit. The subjects moved through it with varying degrees of competence, shouting encouragement in the clipped, overlapping way humans communicated during exertion. One of them fell. A male, heavier build than most of the group. He lost his footing on the 4th platform and dropped approximately 3 meters onto compacted dirt below. Veya-Sor calculated the impact force. Minor skeletal damage was possible. Significant bruising was certain. She prepared to document a standard pain response, elevated vocalization, withdrawal behavior, cessation of activity. He hit the ground. He lay still. 2 seconds passed. Then he laughed. Not a short sound, not a reflex, but a full, open, completely unguarded laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and uncontrolled. The kind that doesn't ask permission first. He rolled onto his back, looked up at the sky, and laughed at it. Veya-Sor checked her translation matrix 3 times and received the same answer each time. In every species she had studied, laughter was a social signal. It meant safety, amusement, the absence of threat. It was the sound a creature made when nothing was wrong. He had just fallen 3 meters. She flagged the incident, told herself it was an anomaly. 1 data point. Insufficient for any conclusion. By the end of the day, she had 7 more. A female subject struck her knee on a metal edge hard enough to leave visible bruising. She looked at her knee, looked at the equipment, and laughed, then said something that translated roughly to, "Oh, excellent." Very graceful. She was mocking herself for being hurt. While being hurt, 2 subjects collided at running speed. Both went down. One split her lip, blood visible on her chin, and they looked at each other for a suspended moment, and then both laughed. The one who was bleeding laughed harder. A senior officer, alone in a corridor, received an urgent communication. Veya-Sor watched his face cycle through stress indicators, tightened jaw, rapid blinking, a particular tension around the eyes. He read the communication, closed his eyes, took 1 breath, and then he laughed. Once quietly, To no one, he was laughing at bad news, alone, with no audience and no social function to serve. Veya-Sor reviewed all 7 incidents that evening. She formed a hypothesis. Her first hypothesis was efficiency. Laughter, she theorized, was a signal, a way of communicating to nearby companions that an injury was minor, that no assistance was required. Practical, even elegant. One vocalization carrying complex information. I am hurt, but not critically. Do not stop. I will continue. The hypothesis didn't survive a human who was completely alone. She found the recording in her archive, a subject working alone on a piece of mechanical equipment. The subject struck her hand on a protruding edge, looked at her hand, looked at the machine, laughed. No audience, no one to signal. She laughed in an empty room because something hurt her, and apparently that was sufficient reason. Hypothesis 1 was abandoned. Her second hypothesis was neurological. Some species have reflex responses that produce vocalizations independent of emotional context. Pain and amusement activating the same pathway, producing the same sound. Perhaps human laughter was similar, involuntary, contextless. This one lasted longer. It lasted until she watched a human give a presentation. 30 subjects seated in rows. One human at the front of the room, organized, rehearsed, clearly prepared. A high-stakes social performance. Appearing competent was presumably the entire point. 40 seconds in, he paused, looked at his notes, looked at his audience, and then deliberately, as a choice, he said, I promise I practiced this. Everyone laughed. He laughed. He had manufactured laughter, intentionally, in a moment designed to demonstrate capability. He had displayed fallibility instead, and used the resulting laughter to make 30 strangers like him more. It worked. Hypothesis 2 was abandoned. Her third hypothesis was the simplest. Perhaps she was wrong about the pain. Perhaps what she had interpreted as significant trauma was, to a human body, genuinely minor. Perhaps the laughter meant exactly what it should mean, that nothing serious had happened. She held on to this one longer than the others. Then the subject who had fallen on the first day sat down near her observation position during a rest period. Another subject joined him. They spoke quietly. The second subject asked how his shoulder was. Hurts like hell, he said. You laughed. A pause. If I don't laugh, he said, I'm going to think about it. All 3 hypotheses were gone at once. She had nothing left but the data. The data made no sense. And she was only on day 5. On day 7, she observed a human almost die. A vehicle malfunctioned during a transport exercise. The vehicle lost traction, crossed a barrier, and came to rest at the edge of a steep incline. Front end suspended over open air. 3 humans inside. Emergency personnel arrived. All 3 were extracted. None critically injured. The last one out was young. As she was helped to solid ground, she stood still for a moment. She looked back at the vehicle. She looked at the drop below it. She exhaled, and she laughed. It was a small sound, involuntary almost, like something that had escaped through a gap she hadn't meant to leave open. She covered her mouth with her hand immediately after. As if surprised by herself, an emergency responder put a hand on her shoulder and said one word, yeah, just that, and she nodded, and her eyes filled. and she laughed again, quietly, once more, and then she was crying, both at the same time, laughing and crying simultaneously, as a single unified response to the same moment. Veya-Sor had no category for it. In 17 species across 22 years, she had never seen it. Laughter meant safety. Tears meant loss. They were opposite signals. They should not coexist. In humans, they did. She watched the recording 4 times before she understood what she was seeing. The young female was not confused. She was not sending mixed signals. She was feeling everything at once, relief and terror together, and her body was expressing both, because there was no reason to choose one and suppress the other. Humans did not wait to finish feeling before continuing. They carried their emotions together, and they kept moving. She widened her observation parameters. She needed more than a training yard. She requested access to the consortium's cultural archive, thousands of hours of recorded human behavior across dozens of contexts. Assembled after first contact, she found what she had been afraid she would find. The laughter was everywhere. Humans laughed when they were nervous, before performances, before competitions, in the quiet moment before stepping into something that frightened them. Not with joy. A laugh that seemed to mean, I am afraid. I am doing this anyway. They laughed at failure. They had built entire categories of entertainment around things going wrong. Recordings of people falling, failing, being humiliated, and they watched them together and laughed. And then Veya-Sor found the funerals. She reviewed them carefully, because she understood how the finding would read, and she wanted to be precise. At every funeral she reviewed, not some, not a few, but every single one of sufficient length. At some point, someone told a story about the person who had died. A memory, and the memory was funny, and people laughed while grieving. Sometimes, while still crying, Veya-Sor consulted 3 separate cultural analysis frameworks. The closest translation she could construct was this: they were keeping the person alive for one more moment. In the only way still available to them, she closed the archive and did not open another file for the rest of that evening. From Veya-Sor's personal addendum, submitted alongside the formal report, I came to this assignment expecting routine data. What I found instead was a species that had developed across the full span of their history, a mechanism I do not have a name for. I am filing this addendum because the formal language of the report is insufficient. I need someone to understand what I actually saw. She filed her contact request on day 9, 11 days ahead of protocol. She needed to ask a question. She could not wait. The contact was arranged through the consortium's liaison office. A single human, briefed and cleared, a cultural interpreter. Her name, in phonetic translation, was something close to Marin. She was not frightened. Veya-Sor noted this immediately. Previous first contact reports had documented elevated stress responses in humans upon visual confirmation of consortium members. The standard response was widened eyes, increased distance, elevated heart rate. Marin looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, hi." As though this were a minor inconvenience she had already made peace with, Veya-Sor asked if she was not alarmed. "I mean, a little," Marin said. "But I signed up for this, so—" She made a small gesture with her shoulders, a movement. Veya-Sor had since learned indicated acceptance of something unchangeable, something the human had decided not to fight. Marin had decided not to fight being alarmed. She described what she had observed: the falls, the pain responses, the nervous laughter before performances, the funerals, the vehicle incident. She said she had documented 34 instances of humans laughing in contexts her research frameworks classified as negative or threatening. She said she had formed 3 hypotheses, and all 3 had failed. She asked, "Why do you laugh?" Marin thought about it. Then she said, "Which time?" Veya-Sor clarified that she meant any of them. All of them. Pick one. It took her a moment to realize this had not been a clarifying question. Marin was quiet. "I think," she said slowly, "your brain knows the difference between this is bad and this is going to kill me. And when it's the first one, when you're going to be okay, something just releases. Like pressure you didn't know you were carrying." Veya-Sor asked about the funerals. "That's different," Marin said. "When you lose someone, you can't hold all of it at once. You can't grieve every second or you'd break. So sometimes something is funny and you laugh, and for just a moment the weight lifts and you can breathe. And the person you lost, they would have laughed too. So it feels like them for just a second, like they're still in the room." Veya-Sor asked about the vehicle incident. The young female at the edge of the incline. Laughing while crying, Marin nodded slowly. She was still scared, she said. "The laugh doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you're still here." Veya-Sor spent the final rotation of her observation period writing her formal report. It was the most difficult document she had produced in 22 years, not because the findings were complex. They were, in the end, very simple. But simple findings that challenge established models require more precision than complex ones, because there is more room for a reader to look away. She would not give them that space. The report began like this: humans experience fear. This is consistent with most known species. They have a threat detection system, a stress response, and evolutionary inheritance that registers danger and reacts to it. In this, they are unremarkable. The difference is not that they don't feel fear. The difference is that they feel it fully, without suppression, and they continue anyway. When the soldier had said, "If I don't laugh, I'm going to think about it," Veya-Sor had initially understood this as avoidance, a deflection dressed as humor. She had been wrong. He was not avoiding the thought. He was choosing the order of operations, choosing to function first and feel the full weight of it later, when he had the time and the safety to do so. He was not running from the pain. He was filing it, saying in his quiet and slightly broken way, "I see you. I will get to you. But not yet, because right now there is still something I need to do." That was not weakness wearing a mask. That was something she did not have a word for, and it was not individual. Not a personality trait found in some humans and absent in others. She had observed it across every age, every rank, every physical profile in her dataset. It was species-wide. The consortium's standard assessment of emerging civilizations evaluated 4 categories: physical capability, technological development, resource access, and psychological resilience under pressure. For humans, the first 3 were moderate, developing, concerning eventually, in the way all expanding civilizations eventually become concerning. It was the 4th category that Veya-Sor could not set down. She had studied creatures with technology centuries beyond humanity's, civilizations, with lifespans measured in millennia. Minds that processed information at speeds humans could not yet conceive. She had never, until those 14 days, watched something ordinary become extraordinary in real time. There was one thing she added at the end of the report, a note after the formal conclusions. On the last morning of her observation period, she had reviewed the vehicle footage one more time. The young female at the edge of the incline, the small escaped laugh, the emergency responder's single word, the laughing and the crying at the same time. She had watched it 4 times already. This was the 5th, and she noticed something she had missed every time before. And she noticed something she had missed every time before, after the young female laughed, and after she cried, and after the responder put a hand on her shoulder. She straightened, her chin came up. Her shoulders settled back into place, like something returning to where it belonged. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She looked at the vehicle one more time, at the incline, at the drop that had almost taken her, and then she turned away from it, deliberately, with intention, and she walked toward the others. No one carried her. No one guided her. No one told her it was time. She decided she was done being on the ground, and she walked. The final lines of Veya-Sor's report read as follows. Revise the assessment. Not because humans are more dangerous than we believed. Danger is the wrong frame. Revise it because we were measuring the wrong things. We looked at their weapons, their technology, their territorial patterns. We did not look at what happens to them when things go wrong. We did not watch what they do after the fall. We did not ask what they do when they are afraid. I have watched. For 14 days I have watched. And here's what I found. They are afraid. They laugh, and then they get up. I have not seen anything in 17 species, across 4 star systems, in 22 years of this work, that I understand less or admire more. Veya-Sor submitted the report. Whether anyone listened was outside the scope of her work. Veya-Sor never stopped thinking about that girl at the edge of the incline. The laugh that escaped the decision to stand up. She stopped trying to find a research category for it. Some discoveries were not explanations. Some were simply observations. Humans laugh, then they get up.